67 seconds. From the White House. The collision. Nobody saw coming. 67 people dead. 300 feet above the Potomac River. Half a mile from the runway. And the United States government has now admitted it knew this would happen. 15,000 near misses in 3 years. 85 of them within 200 feet of collision. The FAA knew. The Army knew. Nothing changed. Until January 29th, 2025. What you're about to see is how a passenger jet and a military helicopter collided in America's most protected airspace. Why the helicopter's transponder was turned off. Why night vision goggles may have prevented the crew from seeing the plane. And how a route that passed within 75 feet of landing aircraft was allowed to operate until 67 people died to force it closed. This is the technical breakdown of the deadliest United States air disaster in 24 years. On the evening of January 29th, 2025, the airspace over Washington, D.C. was operating under its usual complexity. Reagan National Airport, the closest commercial airport to the White House, sits less than 3 miles from the U.S. Capitol. Aircraft arriving at Reagan must navigate around the P-56 prohibited zone, a 13 nautical mile radius of protected airspace surrounding the White House and National Mall. No unauthorized aircraft may enter this zone. At 8:47 p.m., American Airlines Flight 5342, a Bombardier CRJ700 regional jet, was on final approach to runway 33. The aircraft carried 60 passengers and 4 crew members. Simultaneously, U.S. Army Black Hawk Helicopter Priority Air Transport 25 was transiting a designated helicopter corridor along the Potomac River. The helicopter carried 3 soldiers conducting a required annual proficiency evaluation with night vision goggle training. At 8:47 p.m., at an altitude of approximately 300 feet and half a mile from the runway, the 2 aircraft collided in mid-air. Both aircraft fell into the Potomac River. There were no survivors. All 67 people aboard both aircraft were killed. The victims included 28 members of the figure skating community returning from a national development camp in Wichita, 4 union workers, 3 students, and 6 parents from Fairfax County schools, 2 Moody's analysts, a Howard University law professor, and 3 soldiers. Chief Warrant Officer 2 Andrew Eves, age 39. Chief Warrant Officer 2 Kate Lobach, age 33. Staff Sergeant Ryan O'Hara, age 29, a father to a 1-year-old son. The crash was the deadliest U.S. aviation disaster since November 2001. Within hours, search and recovery operations began. Water temperature was near freezing. Visibility was poor. By February 4, all 67 victims had been recovered. The National Transportation Safety Board and Federal Aviation Administration initiated investigations. Before we continue, hit subscribe. If we're about to walk through how 67 people died in airspace, the government knew was dangerous. You'll want to be here for the next story that proves oversight doesn't always mean protection. The airspace around Reagan National Airport is among the most congested in the United States. Its main runway averages 820 arrivals and departures per day. Helicopter Route 4, used by the Black Hawk, runs parallel to the approach path for runway 33. At the collision point, the vertical separation was as narrow as 75 feet. Helicopters were authorized at or below 200 feet. Aircraft on approach descend through altitudes as low as 275 feet at that location. Between October 2021 and December 2024, there were more than 15,000 recorded instances of aircraft and helicopters at Reagan National separated by less than 1 mile horizontally and less than 400 feet vertically. In 85 instances, the aircraft were separated vertically by less than 200 feet. On January 28, 2025, 1 day before the collision, a PSA flight received a collision warning due to 2 Black Hawk helicopters 1 to 2 miles away and 600 feet below. The NTSB and FAA were aware of the near-miss data. No systemic changes were implemented prior to January 29, 2025. Cockpit voice recorders and air traffic control audio provide the final minutes. At 8:45 p.m., Flight 5342 was cleared for a visual approach. Captain Jonathan Campos was the pilot flying. First Officer Samuel Lilly was monitoring. At 8:46 p.m., the air traffic controller asked the Black Hawk crew if they had the inbound jet in sight. The helicopter crew responded affirmatively and requested visual separation clearance. The controller approved. The helicopter crew reported visual contact a second time. It is unclear whether they were monitoring the correct aircraft. Reagan National's airspace often has multiple aircraft on approach simultaneously. The helicopter was equipped with night vision goggles. These devices narrow the field of view and can make it difficult to identify specific aircraft among multiple targets. At 8:47 p.m., less than 1 second before impact, the helicopter instructor told the pilot under evaluation to change course. The instruction came too late. The collision occurred at 278 feet. This was 78 feet above the maximum authorized altitude for helicopters on Route 4. If you're still watching, hit subscribe. We're about to explain how multiple safety systems failed simultaneously, and if that sounds familiar, you'll want to be here when we cover the next disaster that proves redundancy isn't always enough. The Black Hawk's ADSB system was turned off. A DSB broadcasts an aircraft's location, altitude, and speed to air traffic control and other aircraft. The FAA requires ADSB for most aircraft in controlled airspace. The military had exemptions. The Black Hawk was not broadcasting its position. The jet's TCAS did not issue a collision avoidance alert. TCAS relies on transponder signals. Without the helicopter's ADSB active, the system had no data to process. The controller's conflict alert system sounded in the tower for 20 seconds before the collision. The controller did not issue a traffic advisory or take immediate action. The controller was working a combined position that normally required 2 people. The tower was operating 1/3 below targeted staffing. The helicopter's barometric altimeter may have provided inaccurate readings. The NTSB recovered the flight data recorder on January 31st. The recorded pressure altitude data was invalid. The discrepancy suggests the crew may not have known their precise height. On March 11th, 2025, the NTSB issued urgent safety recommendations. The board called the vertical separation insufficient and an intolerable risk to aviation safety. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy accepted the recommendations within hours. On January 31st, the FAA restricted helicopter flights near Reagan National. The restrictions prohibited simultaneous fixed-wing and helicopter operations. Exemptions were allowed for emergencies, law enforcement, air defense, and presidential transport. In December 2025, the United States government admitted liability. The Department of Justice stated, "The United States admits that it owed a duty of care to plaintiffs, which it breached, thereby proximately causing the tragic accident on January 29, 2025. The filing acknowledged that the Black Hawk pilots failed to maintain visual separation and that the controller violated procedures. The government was on notice of near-miss events prior to the collision. If you've made it this far, subscribe. Because if we're about to show you what happens when documented warnings are ignored until disaster forces change, you'll want front row access to every investigation that rewrites the rules only after bodies are recovered. A congressional report identified 5 contributing factors: communication issues, night vision goggles that limited visibility, the Black Hawk's ADSB being turned off, lack of Army knowledge about Reagan National's airspace, and an offline Pentagon hotline. The report noted that had the ADSB been active and night vision goggles not been in use, the collision likely would not have occurred. The Army has since implemented changes. A hotline to Reagan National was re-established. Flights were limited. Navigation systems are now required active during training missions. On May 3rd, 2025, 3 months after the collision, 2 commercial jetliners were forced to abort landings at Reagan National due to an Army Black Hawk entering restricted airspace. Transportation Secretary Duffy called the violation unacceptable. He stated, "We just lost 67 souls. No more helicopter rides for VUIPS or unnecessary training in congested DCA, airspace full of civilians." American Airlines Flight 5342 was the first direct passenger service between Wichita, Kansas, and Washington, D.C. The route had been operational for approximately 1 year. The flight's inaugural year ended in tragedy. Recovery operations concluded on February 8, 2025. All major pieces of both aircraft had been recovered. A memorial was established near the recovery site. Families gathered on February 1st, 2025, to place flowers and crosses along the riverbank. The memorial includes 67 individual markers overlooking the section of the Potomac River where both aircraft came to rest. The passage of time does not erase the absence. 67 lives were lost in an airspace where the danger was documented, the warnings were clear, and the action was delayed. The final NTSB report will determine the official cause. The families will wait for answers. The changes to airspace procedures will remain in effect. The Potomac River continues to flow past Reagan National Airport. The White House stands 3 miles away. The restricted zone remains in place. The helicopters no longer fly the route. 67 seconds from the White House. 67 lives.